So the human need to have law is universal. The problem, and because it's a universal need, it's also one that, again, founded in human nature, doesn't really work very well in a lot of cases. Although what I would say is this: it doesn't work in the boundary cases. I mean, the hard cases. But the gun rights thing is an insoluble problem. You've got an instrument that is used to kill all these people. What are you going to do about that? Well, it's not good that all these people are being killed, but there's really no way to stop these people from being killed. So therefore, how do you legislate? Well, you legislate, I suppose, as in Homeric times, you kill a bunch of oxen and burn their thigh bones on a altar with the fat on it to create a lot of smoke. And the creation of the smoke, is metaphorical for what legislators do.
What is going on, everybody? 'Tis I, the enigma of the gun airwaves, Mianovich, welcoming you to Season 3 of the Liberal Gun Owners Lens podcast, where unprecedented perspectives are packed into the cargo hold for the LGO Lens spaceship Voyagio.
That's fucking Italian.
Don't believe that evolution is possible with guns and public safety in America? It's already happening, y'all. Minds are evolving. Think guns versus public safety is the only game in town, do ya? Think culture war is the big boss, do ya? Then keep your ass in the past. Everyone else, all aboard! We've been dealing with the issue of human nature, the yin and the yang, the angel and the devil. We've been dealing with it the whole time, right? So let's say tens of thousands of years. Has any idea? We've thrown everything at it. We've thrown boil the person alive, draw and quarter. We've thrown Jesus at it. We've thrown Buddha at it. We've thrown Bibles at it, religions at it. We've thrown science at it. And based on what Pinker has said, things are generally better. But have we knocked it out from what we do? Absolutely not. And there's no reason to expect that that's ever going to happen. And so my thing is, as we're talking here about, hey, let's be honest about everything and put it on the table. Because I honestly think this mythology that people are involved in over what policy and law can do is a part of the problem. So if we can be honest about we have this intractable issue and we can't just say, and this policy is going to solve it or whatever, I think we're in a better position to perhaps mitigate in the places that we can, as opposed to what I think is part and parcel to our the Western institution, the phenomenon of the West being a cultural reality, right? I think part and parcel to that is state sovereignty, the government, rule of law. All of these things are selling, whether they're intentionally doing it or not. I think they are. They're selling that they're the deliverer of control and safety and comfort for people. And I do think humans have an emotional need to have that paternal thing happening for them so that they don't have to look at what you and I just discussed, which is some of this is unstoppable. My opinion is I think as a species, we're in a better place probably if we start to let go of the illusion a little bit and stop thinking that the government or law or something above us can control this thing entirely. Not to say we're going to throw it out, but let's just stop living with this. I mean, I don't know how we stop having this deep need to be comforted or to not look at how fucking horrible nature can be for us, or how horrible existence can be, or how chaotic, or like you said, to even look in the mirror and say, I'm not even sure I have free will. That's devastating for most humans. But I think we need to start looking at those things if we're going to have better successes as we move forward. And that's sort of the reason why I want everything on the table. I want to be able to say the government can't solve all these problems. The rule of law can't get out and control all these problems. Policies can't solve these things all the time. And I want people to start to kind of wake up a little bit to that. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it makes sense as an aspiration. I would tell you that from a political perspective, you're dead in the water. But it's an aspiration. I mean, it's certainly it's a good aspiration to have your eyes open to see what is there as opposed to what is stated to be there and may not even exist. But we have to also remember that the perfect is the enemy of the good, and the moral arc of the universe does bend toward justice. I mean, I do think that possibly is true. It's just a slow process, and it has many, many casualties along the way. But it is certainly important to have a clear-eyed perspective on these kinds of issues, just so that we're not suffering continuously from disappointment that the most recent, latest, and greatest statutory innovation has failed. The famous statement by Immanuel Kant is that the crooked timber of humanity can't be made to build anything straight or true. And the crooked timber of humanity is human nature. So it's certainly a noble aspiration to open people's eyes, and I commend you for trying to do it. But it's also quixotic, in the sense that people want comfort. I mean, the comfort that the law affords is that it's a totalizing system. It is in effect totalitarian, although I don't use that in the typical meaning of that word. It's totalizing. It wants to govern everything. It's an institution which expands to cast its light or its gloom, depending upon how you see it, into every nook and cranny. And so the totalizing institution of the law does afford to people comfort, which might not otherwise exist, and they might also keeps them from seeing the chaos that generally surrounds us. And if you look back at other totalizing institutions, everyone always knew they were bullshit, to some degree at least. The last totalizing institution in the West before the Enlightenment was the Catholic Church, in Europe at least. And the Catholic Church in Europe was totalizing in the sense that it reached into all aspects of human life. And it attempted to govern and legislate in all aspects of human life, and in fact afterlife too. People, I assume, under that regime felt that it was a good thing, and it was comforting to them to know that there was a system of justice that was divine. It may not be on the earth, but it existed somewhere. And people, I think, in that system were pleased to be part of the great chain of being, even if they were on the bottom. You read in Shakespeare's plays about the chain of being that extends up to the angels and then God. Well, there was a place in that society for every person, and every person had a role. That comforted people. The same feature existed in dogmatic Marxism. The last bastion of dogmatic Marxism was East Germany. And if you travel in East Germany now, you will encounter many, many people who are extremely and profoundly nostalgic for East German Marxism, and felt that it was a system that, although it was certainly flawed and it was repressive, it also afforded a wide degree of comfort to those who were adherents to it, because and everyone had to be, because they knew where they were placed in that society, and they had certain expectations that could always be achieved.
Yeah.
They may have been limited or constrained expectations, but they were expectations that could be achieved and were subsidized by the state, as it were. So there's a strong desire among people to have to be part of a totalizing system that tells you what to do in every respect of your aspect of your life. And in default of the Catholic Church or organized religion, which is now, I think, essentially after COVID dead, at least in the United States, and certainly has been dead in Europe since the 40s. What do people have to replace it? Well, they have Kim Kardashian, social media, being part of some sort of specious and pernicious entertainment culture, which is totalizing too. I mean, you can't get away from that either. Everywhere you look, you see a totalizing entertainment culture, which is, as the Marxists would say, tremendous evidence of a false consciousness. That's one thing. The other alternative, if you're more thoughtful, is the law, to say, well, these are legal principles, and they are invariable. They are powerful, in that they can, in fact, they do have prescriptive force. They can tell us how to live. Now, again, I don't think that people might take solace in that, just like I take solace in examining Kim Kardashian. But I also don't have any illusions about what Kim Kardashian can do for me, and I don't have any. Most people shouldn't have any illusions about what the law will or can do for them. I mean, the law will work fine if you get into a car crash, if you're charged with drunk driving, if you have a property dispute, someone's encroaching on your boundary. The law will work just fine, and it will work in a rational way, more or less, unless you have a trial, which then slides you into the domain of the irrational. But up to the point where lawyers should do their fucking work, which is to settle the case. You certainly should not be trying these cases, because that's a ingredient for catastrophe. But if the lawyer does his job or her job and brings the case to a prompt and expeditious settlement, the lawyer has done the best the lawyer can do, and the law has worked there and will work there satisfactorily, because the stakes are such that the case can be settled. The tragedy, as I pointed out in my speech, and it's something I still believe, is the kinds of cases that can't be settled. And that's where the law then has to promote a irrational means of settlement, which is jury trial, which is not a good way to resolve cases. It's the best way we have, unfortunately. I don't know of anything that would be better. Maybe some kind of arbitration, but then you still have to have a fair arbitrator. So, you subject the dispute, which is otherwise insoluble, to a jury trial or a trial of some kind, which then marches you right into the domain of fantasy and dreams, because the way trials operate is not like anything else, really. It's a kind of very bad form of opera, and it doesn't. It's not a good way to resolve disputes. But again, I would say it's the best thing we have.
So the thesis for your talk on Law's Empire, some people have called this hyperlexis. I've called it overlaw before. So you think that this is a function of just our nature, where the totalizing system and our desire to have somebody there or have something there that we belong to, that defines boundaries, that tells us it's all going to be okay, or things are going to work out, or this is going to be dealt with, or we're going to solve the problems, that totalizing aspect of the law is basically generated by both the people, the government, well, not both, but all players, the people in charge, the common people, we're all generating it at once.
Yeah, that's the nature of the totalizing system. It requires total buy-in. So all participants are typically bought into it. Now, since I gave that talk, my thinking has evolved to some degree on the totalizing system, because when I gave the talk, I didn't really explicitly discuss the administrative law issues. Administrative law is really the place in which most people are going to encounter the totalizing system of the law. When they're told they can't drain a wetland, or when a governmental agency interferes with the operation of their business or something like that. And this is in my TED Talk, and these TED Talks are, I don't know if they do them anymore, but when they did them, those TED Talks are generated in the context of a cult. It's the cult of the TED Talk, and you got to give the talk in a tone of urgency, and you have to assert in a sort of breathless way that you figured something out, which is a bullshit way of proceeding, but that's what they want in those talks. And if you look at my speech, and I know you saw that I did that. Yeah. What I totally missed in the TED Talk is the entire phenomena of the administrative state. Beginning in 1932, when the Supreme Court affirmed the Administrative Law Act, which controlled the governmental agencies, more and more of the actual law has been delegated to administrative agencies. And there's an argument to be made, and it's made by Alexis de Tocqueville in his book, The Ancient Regime and French Revolution. You maybe know the book. De Tocqueville says that the French monarchy was always a centralized administrative state with everything, all organs of power emanating from Versailles. And the result was an enormous administrative state. Well, the effect of the administrative state was that the local citizens had no control over anything. There was a lack of autonomy in the local citizens. The administrative state is a huge bugaboo here. The problem with however, again, if I'm going to eat meat, I don't want rat shit in it. So I guess I'm going, and I live in a town where we slaughter pigs. If I'm going to eat Spam, I don't want to be eating rat shit or cockroach wings. And so, okay, who's going to control that? Well, the FDA controls that. Do I want to abolish the FDA? Because here's the problem you always encounter. I was at a right-wing think tank down in Dallas years ago. These people were nuts, and they wanted to abolish all these agencies. It's like, okay, all right, let's just talk about this. Which agency do you guys want to abolish? Do you want to abolish the agencies that are responsible for safe roads? Yeah. Well, no. Okay. Well, do you want to abolish work comp and OSHA? Well, some of these people did want to abolish OSHA, although you could tell that they were demented and deranged. You abolish OSHA, what the fuck is going to happen? The employers are just going to start murdering their employees. So when it comes down to the administrative state, everyone says, well, there's too much regulation. Well, tell me then what institution of the administrative state you want to abolish. Yeah. Well, quickly you'll find no one can really name anything because of the rat shit in your spam phenomenon. They want some governmental agent looking over the stuff to make sure it's coming out clean. And this is true of water rights. It's true of federal land. It's true of Interstate Commerce Commission, or the OSHA control over trucks. I mean, do you really want the OSHA control over trucks to go away? Department of Labor control over trucks? I don't. I want trucks to be driven in a certain way with certain types of brakes that work. So we have this enormous efflorescence of the administrative state. It's tremendous expansion of it, and it extends to things like maybe you followed this case in the courts, the Crown Law case.
I didn't.
The Crown Law case is a case that says you can't have restrictions on people's natural hair.
I heard about it in the news, but I didn't know that's what
it is. We have that in Minnesota, and amazingly enough, in the bastion of what I would call, again, deranged conservatism, that is Texas, they have it there too. And what they're doing there is it's basically a racial injustice issue or racial discrimination issue. Okay, now one could argue, following my thesis about the hyperlexia, as you call it, or the overreach of the law, that telling people how long their dreadlocks can be, has kind of jumped the shark on that one.
Yeah.
We're really going to have hair police, and the hair police are going to determine how long the dreadlocks can be? Okay, so one would say, well, this is a classic example of the administrative or the nanny state interfering in people's hairstyles.
Yeah.
Okay. On the other hand, the reason they're interfering in people's hairstyles is because there are some other group of bastards who are telling them how long they can have their hair. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, of course, that law looks idiotic. And it literally came to the question of telling this kid to unravel your dreadlock, pull it down, and see if it extends below your earlobe. It did, and therefore he lost the case. Okay, this is what's happening in a court of law in the United States and Texas. Now, Texas, again, I regard as an exception because it's crazy down there. But the fact is, in this last month, they had a court hearing in which a judge in a black robe stood there and had a kid unravel his dreadlocks. I don't even know how you do that, and pull them down to see how far they extended, to see if he was or was not in violation of school code, and whether the school code was abrogated by the Crown Law. Now, one can mock this. And I am, but that law exists for a reason. It exists for a reason because certain disenfranchised groups are being tortured over their hair.
Yeah. Okay,
so what's the remedy? Well, again, to address the hyperlexia issue, the remedy is let's pass a law. Okay, they forget that, of course, enforcing the law is going to expose everyone to ridicule, including the claimant. But this is an example of why we have all of this. This, again, the nanny state, as people sometimes derisively call it, the notion that the government is going to interfere in every feature of your life.
Yeah.
Well, the government interferes, it sure does, but if you look down to the root cause, it's typically, and in this case, the root cause is the hair roots, but if you look down to it, you're going to find that there is someone who is indulging themselves in some sort of tyrannical overreach that then generates a law, and the law then represents a tyrannical overreach.
Yeah.
So we're in this cycle where the oppressors generate rules that are oppressive, And then the law tries to fix those and fixes those by generating laws that are oppressive. And so it goes. And so it has always gone. You know, the bullshit that I imposed upon the world in the TED Talk is I acted as if it was something new.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
You know, it's not. Tacitus, when he was commenting on the German tribes around the year 100, 80 or BC, I don't know which, said, you know, the German tribes have almost no laws. Therefore, they are clean, pure, and virtuous. They lack the corruption because they lack corruption because they don't have a bunch of lawyers running around. Okay, that's untrue because there's no tribe without law, and I'm sure these German tribes had a lot of laws. Yeah. Tacitus just didn't know what they were.
Right.
Similarly, you know, Samuel Johnson writes, the more laws, the more corrupt. The state with the most laws is the most corrupt. Okay, true, probably in a way, maybe or maybe not. I mean, again, it's something that has to be thought about. But these are critiques that were made in the first century, you know, even before the Code of Justinian in Rome, which again was a totalizing law, which covered everything. It was like the Code Napoleon, which covered everything. And Samuel Johnson, they didn't have many statutes when Samuel Johnson was around. They did things by the common law, by case law. But nonetheless, he felt that the expansion of law into many different realms of human behavior was completely unwarranted and led to corruption. So this is an immemorial problem. I mean, I'm sure there's someone in some bureaucrat in Sumeria who was charged with enforcing the Code of Hammurabi, you know, who was saying, well, you know, it says you're not supposed to kill your slaves, but can you kill a slave if you beat him to death and he dies the next day? Well, we maybe need to have a law on that. We maybe need to develop some regulations on that, and they did. Yeah. So the human need to have law is universal. The problem, and because it's a universal need, it's also one that, again, founded in human nature, it doesn't really work very well in a lot of cases. Although what I would say is this: it doesn't work in the boundary cases. I mean, the hard cases. Yeah. It works just great in a dispute about an easement. You know, can you drive your car across this jointly held driveway or something? Yeah. Those kinds of issues, the law works fine in. But when it comes to issues that are what I would call fetish issues, with all due respect to you, guns are fetishes. Sure. Unborn babies are fetishes. Certain types of human rights or alleged human rights are fetish rights. That they're totemic, you know, they define membership in a tribe. Those kinds of fetish rights or totemic rights, those always represent the test cases because those are the cases that can't be resolved in any rational way. And if those cases can't be resolved in a rational way, then you have to fall on your knees and pray to the gods, and that's what we do in a jury trial. We look to the heavens for guidance, because we institute palpably irrational procedures, because we recognize that mere human reason is insufficient to settle these problems. This is what I call in my, I call it today, I don't know what I said in the lecture, but this is the Hegelian concept of tragedy. Tragedy arises when you have two different rights that are inconsistent, but each right is unmovable. And the tragic hero is one who is blessed or cursed with such righteous ferocity that he takes on the system and usually ends up killed. But it's not that the tragic hero is wrong, but from his perspective, he's right. Similarly, the state which crushes him, like in Antigone, I mean, she gets buried alive in the Sophocles play. In Antigone, the state that crushes her is also right. So you have two rights, each with strong justifying causes or ideas behind them, and those rights are in irreconcilable conflict. So what did the Greeks say? The Greeks said, well, you're going to have the gods fix this, which they usually did by killing everyone inside. They say, okay, you guys got yourself into this problem. Fuck you all. I'm going to kill you all. Right. And that's how you know, Antigone and these classical Bacchae, Euripides Bacchae, that's how the Greeks resolved it. They just killed everyone. I mean, had the gods kill everyone. We can't do that. So what we do is we subject our sort of imponderable disputes, the disputes on which both sides have equal arguments. I mean, the classic example is the reproductive rights issue. I mean, it's very hard to say that the proponents of abortion are wrong. It's very hard to say the proponents of protecting fetal babies are wrong. So how are you going to resolve that? Well, of course, we know they can't resolve it because the legislature took a pass on that one, didn't they? Until they now got stuck with a case that says they can't. So now what are they going to do? Well, they don't know what to do because they can't figure out what to do because it is by nature an insoluble problem. And human beings are confronted with those, fortunately not very often. But, the gun rights thing is an insoluble problem. You've got an instrument that is used to kill all these people. What are you going to do about that? Well, it's not good that all these people are being killed, but there's really no way to stop these people from being killed. So therefore, how do you legislate? Well, you legislate, I suppose, as, in Homeric times, you kill a bunch of oxen and burn their thigh bones on a altar with the fat on it to create a lot of smoke. And the creation of the smoke, is metaphorical for what legislators do, or what courts do. Courts burn the thigh bones on the altar of sacrifice and the smoke rises and no one can see what the fuck's going on. And that ultimately is how the law works in these difficult cases. Now, I would, again, hasten to say that most cases don't, the kind of cases I'm doing here today, they don't, I don't have to burn a cow. I'm going to be able to figure those out. And if I'm doing my job, I'm going to settle the case because other lawyers, you can't settle cases with unrepresented parties because they're by definition nuts. They went to a lawyer. But you can settle cases with lawyers because they think like I think. Do we really want to have a trial on this and subject this to some guy who is a judge because he got booted out of his law firm because he was a shitty lawyer? Because that's in the rural areas where I live, that's what judges are like. So, you don't want to have a trial. Are you really going to have the jury of 12 people too dumb to get out of jury duty decide the case? Are those the people you want deciding the case? You want to decide the case on the basis of venue? You just happen to be in some certain county? Do you want to decide the case on the basis of something which we have here happen all the time? Some high school educated clerk doesn't like your case, so she just slow walks it. The judge is like, well, whatever happened to that case that Beckmann filed? Well, I don't know. I don't like him, so I lost it. There are so many different vagaries of ways that cases get screwed up. And then ultimately you have the great institution, the bulwark of our northern liberties. Again, Blackstone called it the jury. The bulwark of our northern liberties is you are in a forum in which everything is on the record. Everything is recorded except the jury deliberations, which are cloaked by this mystic secrecy. No one knows what they're doing in there. Once I overheard what they were doing in there, and I will tell you, I was so appalled that I thought, well, I should give up the practice of the law. Because you could hear them in there shouting at each other. And it's like, this doesn't resemble anything that looks like a deliberative process to me. I don't know what they were doing in there, comparing incomes or something to see who should be the boss. But it's and you have a system where the which is weighed down by these archaic remnants of the old law. The judge in the robe, the bench, the mise en scène of the jury trial with people moving around in certain choreographed ways during the trial. You have the fact that you can't appeal the factual findings of a judge typically. So if the judge makes a finding, you can't appeal credibility findings. There are all of these factors that render the process completely irrational. Although, again, I would say, it expresses the general will, and the general will, as they say, the law is the general will. It more or less comes out right most of the time. But in the big cases, it usually it can be highly distorted.
Well, John, where does it all end? Like, where does this go? So it's building. As you said in your talk, it's in every single thing that we do. It's trying to have, it's a totalizing state. It's totalizing juggernaut phenomenon. It's trying to get into every single thing that we do. We don't stop it. Where does this go in the United States of America? Where does it choke us into and we just become lemmings? Is there some kind of a rebellion? When you say that all empires fall, that this legal empire is going to fall, what's going to happen? Like, what do you foresee?
Well, it's already underway. The last bulwark of credibility was the Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court now is in discredit. It doesn't look too good the way it's being run now. If the Supreme Court becomes discredited, and you've seen it with these trials, there are two recent trials, one involving Trump and then this hearing involving this woman, Fani Willis, who is the female version of Trump. In both of these trials, The litigant just went in there and it disregarded all rules of procedure and simply gave political lectures. She did that, and he did that. It didn't avail them because it may avail her, but that case has got weird, aspects to it that I don't fully understand. But what's going to happen is going to be disregard for the rule of law. The law will be disrespected. The Supreme Court has already been cast into disrepute by the conduct of some of its members and has been accused of being heavily politicized. It used to be that Supreme Court justices, with their lifelong tenure, when they got there, they would mellow and they would become institutionalists as opposed to the firebrands that they were when they were appointed. Well, we haven't seen that. I mean, Clarence Thomas never has become an institutionalist as far as I can tell. He remains wedded to whatever ideology he had when he came on the bench 20 years ago. Under contentious circumstances, if you recall. So I think what's going to happen at some stages, there will be, the law doesn't work. The great thing about the law is that it requires everyone's complicity. And if you have someone like Donald Trump or Fani Willis who simply say, I will not obey this system, in her case, a system that she's sworn to uphold, I will not obey this. I will come into court, disregard the rules of evidence, give non-responsive answers, make political speeches, which also is what Trump has done. You're going to have a situation where if people decide that they should emulate that, then the final, these trials are going to become even more meaningless than they might be now. And I don't think they're meaningless now in most cases. But if the general public, the populace, the citizenry thinks that the that the judicial system is irrevocably corrupt, then the respect for the rule of law is eroded. Now it will take. I'm old, so I fortunately won't see it, but it'll take 100 years. And what will replace it? What's going to replace it is some sort of bizarre technological form of artificial intelligence, in my view. If I sound like science fiction here, but I don't. We're all in the clutches now of a technology which is going to turn us all into some kind of robotic factotums. What will replace it? I presume some sort of algorithm. I won't live to see it, thank God. You might see a little of it. But that's what's going to happen, because if the rule of law fails, then where are you? Well, you have to have something. So you're going to have an algorithm. This is my perverse view of it. You get old and you've seen it. I've seen several iterations of my age of the madness, and you always think, well, this has to come to an end. Frankly, it doesn't. It doesn't ever come to an end. It can't come to an end. It just continues to be the way it is until one day there's a paradigm shift and it's not that way anymore. And with the total disrespect for the law, which I'm now seeing in these people that one would emulate, I think that we're heading toward the collapse of the rule of law.
It's nice to hear you say sort of your estimate on how long you think that would take. I think a lot of people are having similar feelings about things falling to shit, and I try not to be a crazy prepper or like somebody who's paranoid with the tinfoil hat on, but we're certainly in the labor pains of something in one way it would be unprecedented. In another way, as you just said, it always happens. Things fall apart and they continue, but we're certainly in the labor pains of something I think that would be unprecedented for most of us in terms of experience. It's going to be something, whether it's big in terms of it's just kind of builds on itself a little bit and it ends up being big, and then we're so used to having a robot jammed up our ass we didn't even know there's anything wrong with that. Or we just wake up one day and they're jamming robots in everybody's ass. Like I think something along those lines, but unprecedented for sure.
Yeah, well, we're in, I think the Italian Marxist Gramsci said, we're in an interregnum in which the old is dead and the new has not yet been born. And that's what it feels like. Now, again, I also would say this, it always feels like that, though, to people, in particular my generation. It's like, well, what happened to the world that I was raised in? It had certain features that don't seem to exist anymore. Well, that's an old man just bemoaning the fact that he's become obsolescent. But we do seem to be in a inflection point, I think you could say, about the rule of law. Again, the law moves at a glacial pace. So the principles I've talked about today that you understand are going to still be with us until 2100. But by that time, they will be much eroded. And what will replace them, I don't know. But it certainly seems that the advance of technology as a totalizing system is irreversible at this stage. I mean, if I had to have my office staff set this meeting up because I can't do this, but people like her, it's not even she doesn't even regard it as a task because she's used to this kind of thing. So I think it's going to be a slow evolution of human adaptation, although human nature doesn't ever change. I mean, you can argue that the way people behave today is somewhat less violent than the way they behaved at the time of Homer. You know, if you want an eye-opener, read Don Quixote, in which the big gag lines always involve someone getting a bone broken. You know, oh, it was really funny. They threw him in a blanket so high that he came down and broke his leg. People thought that was really, just wildly funny in 1600 or whenever that book was written. Well, we don't think that's funny anymore because I don't know why. I guess we're not tough enough to enjoy broken legs, but we don't think that way anymore. And people are generally becoming milder, gentler, and they're also becoming smarter, strangely enough. I mean, they're the effects that they've determined that people are generally brighter now than they were 100 years ago. So, there's reason for hope. And whatever the next totalizing system is, for those people who live in it, it'll be great, in a way. There will be critical thinkers like you who will probably periodically challenge the algorithm using telepathic brain waves that you're emitting through a machine. But and there will always be some who dissidents, and there will be the great majority of people who accept the system in which they live, like fish accept water.
Yeah, but for certain, you feel like humans are just, I'm going to use the term doomed, right? But we're locked in to go from one totalizing system to another. Yes,
I do. I don't see any time in human history when that didn't exist. People would like to say, well, I don't know. Did you read this book by Graeber? It's called The Beginning of Everything or something. It's a book about the prehistory of archaeology. I really recommend it. Or the prehistory. They attacked the paradigm of the Neolithic agricultural revolution, which people like Gary Snyder, the poet, have always said, well, that's where we went wrong. That Neolithic revolution, which occurred 8,000 years before Christ, that's when everything went bad. Now Graeber and Wengrow, the guys who wrote this, said, well, it actually maybe went bad a long time before that too. So everyone wants to believe in a system that is somehow comforting to them, and which in some way offers some sort of assurance. And I don't foresee that will ever change. In recorded history, it's never changed. So right now we're in a era in which the collapse of the Catholic Church or the Christian Church and the collapse of Marxism, communism, those were the hopes of the future. Marxism and communism particularly, they were the thing that was going to replace the Catholic Church as a worldwide revolution of the workers and the proletariat, and everyone was going to... Now again, if you read Marx, you never figured out what they were going to do exactly. He said, well, they'll engage in dialectic in the morning and herd their sheep in the afternoon. That would be great. I mean, I'd like to engage in dialectic in the morning and herd my sheep too, but that's the best idea he had of what would happen when the classless society finally came. So he didn't have any idea what he was working toward because he couldn't figure it out. With the collapse of Marxism as being a acceptable paradigm, which gave a alternative to capitalism, which is more or less a disaster, and the Catholic Church, which ended up being a repressive institution. What do we have now? Well, we have now is law. The democracies are characterized by law. We have a system of representatives who make laws for us, and we agree to abide by those laws. And those laws represent, in Rousseau's terms, the general will. Okay, the general will of the people are expressed by the laws. The only problem with the general will of the people is the general will of the people in France in 1789 and thereafter led directly to the terror. Because you let the general will of the people prevail, where are the checks and boundaries on that? Checks and balances on that? There aren't any. So that's why deterrence, by the way, represents the general will of the people. So it's hard to really criticize it because that's the general will. Now, it doesn't work, but that's what the general will wants. And so we're in a world right now where the general will says, well, let's have lots of laws, even though we know that laws always invoke a certain level of hubris and will often lead to very, very bad and tragic consequences. But that's where we are at this moment, in my humble estimation, and where the future takes us, only God, who doesn't exist, knows.